Long before our modern cities rose, vast civilizations flourished and vanished, leaving behind impossible feats of engineering, star maps carved in stone, and monuments aligned with cosmic precision. Who were these ancient builders? How did they master knowledge we still struggle to understand? From sunken cities to silent pyramids, the ruins speak, but in riddles. These aren't just lost cultures. They may be missing chapters of human history we were never meant to read. Beneath the windswept plains of southern Spain, buried under centuries of silence, lies the ghost of a civilization, once drenched in gold power and mystery. A kingdom so rich the Greeks spoke of it in awe. A land so lost, no one can say where its capital stood. This was Tartessos, Europe's forgotten golden empire. It flourished long before Rome traded with the Phoenicians' dazzled Greek sailors, and then it simply disappeared. No war, no trace, no explanation. What force could erase an entire civilization from history? Was Tartessos consumed by water, crushed by war, or swallowed by time itself? This is the story of a kingdom that should never have vanished, and the secrets it may still be hiding beneath the soil. What do you think happened to Tartessos? Was it wiped out by a natural disaster, erased by invaders, or lost to history through slow decay? Drop your theories in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you believe happened to Europe's lost golden empire. Tartessos arose in the fertile basin of the Guadalquivir River near the modern city of Seville. Positioned strategically between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, this region was abundant in natural resources, gold, silver, copper, and especially tin, essential for making bronze. Its riches drew the attention of seafaring peoples like the Phoenicians and Greeks, who established trade relations and left records of a kingdom brimming with opulence and exotic customs. Greek writers such as Herodotus described Tartessos as a great kingdom ruled by a long line of kings, notably one named Argantonios, who reportedly reigned for 80 years and lived to the incredible age of 120. To the Greeks, Tartessos was more than a trading partner. It was a mythic land of wealth and longevity, almost too marvelous to be real. Yet the archaeological record offers tantalizing support. Gold jewelry, elaborate artifacts, and funerary sites suggest a people skilled in metallurgy, trade, and religious ritual. Tartessian society was a unique cultural melting pot. While rooted in Iberian traditions, it was deeply influenced by the Phoenicians' masters of maritime trade and writing. This interaction gave rise to a hybrid art-style architecture and even a mysterious Tartessian script, which remains only partially deciphered to this day. Their temples and burial grounds reveal complex spiritual beliefs, likely blending local animism with Phoenician deities like Baal and Astarte. The Phoenicians may also have brought not just commerce, but cosmopolitanism, exposing Tartessians to new technologies, writing systems, and religious concepts. As a result, Tartessos became the first truly urbanized society in Western Europe. But this rapid rise, strangely, was followed by an equally swift disappearance. Around 500 BCE, Tartessos vanished, not faded slowly or transformed, gradually vanished. The city-states, kings, and culture that Greek chroniclers had once admired were suddenly gone. There were no more mentions in foreign texts, no more new inscriptions, no obvious ruins of capital cities. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed Tartessos whole. This disappearance remains one of the great historical puzzles of the ancient world, with several competing theories, none conclusive. One hypothesis suggests that a massive natural disaster, perhaps a tsunami or an earthquake along the Iberian coast, devastated the region. The southwest of the Iberian Peninsula is seismically active, and such a catastrophe could have easily wiped out low-lying settlements, ports, and agricultural centers. This theory gains traction from the fact that many Tartessian sites are coastal, and the sudden silence in the archaeological record hints at abrupt total collapse, not slow decline. Some scholars even speculate that Tartessos may have been destroyed in a flooding event so dramatic it inspired later myths, including the story of Atlantis. Though highly speculative, this idea resonates with Plato's account of a rich, advanced society destroyed by water. Another plausible theory involves politics and war. As Phoenicia's power waned due to Assyrian and Babylonian pressure in the Near East, its western colonies, especially Carthage, grew stronger. Carthage became the dominant maritime power in the western Mediterranean, and with its rise came a new order, one that may have found Tartessos both a threat and a rival. Some historians believe Carthage may have wiped out Tartessos, militarily destroying its cities or forcing its leaders into submission. More subtly, Carthage may have simply cut off Tartessos from its key trade routes, starving the economy and culture until it disintegrated. In either case, the Phoenician allies of Tartessos were no longer in power, leaving the kingdom isolated and vulnerable. Yet another theory posits that Tartessos didn't vanish so much as it faded into other cultures. Over time, its elites may have merged with neighboring Iberian tribes, or Celtiberians losing their distinct identity. With the decline of international trade and growing local instability, Tartessian cities may have been abandoned. Gradually, their people absorbed into rural societies or new regional powers. This would explain why so few identifiable Tartessian ruins have been found. They may lie beneath later settlements or were reused and repurposed. The lack of texts or monumental inscriptions from this later phase may signal a loss of literacy and elite culture rather than total destruction. Perhaps the most perplexing part of the Tartessos mystery is that its capital city has never been located. Unlike Troy or Mycenae, there is no clearly identified urban center that can definitively be called Tartessos. Numerous archaeological digs have proposed possible candidates, such as the site at El Carambolo, where a cache of gold jewelry was found in 1958, but no consensus exists. Some suggest the capital now lies under modern Seville or was washed away by ancient floods. Others believe it may be buried beneath silt in the Doñana National Park. But despite advanced technology, satellite surveys, and ground-penetrating radar, no lost city of Tartessos has emerged, only fragments, tombs, and treasures. This absence of physical cities is partly what gives Tartessos its mythic quality. It is a civilization attested in foreign accounts, confirmed by mysterious artifacts, yet missing the urban footprint that defines most ancient cultures. The tale of Tartessos continues to haunt scholars and storytellers. Its sudden silence around 500 BCE marks one of the sharpest cultural disappearances in European prehistory. For a civilization that once traded with Phoenicia, welcomed Greek ships, minted wealth in metal, and may have inspired the legend of Atlantis, to vanish without a trace is both baffling and enthralling. Even now, gold artifacts with intricate patterns, carved stone slabs with unknown symbols, and ancient tombs point to a world once vibrant with life and ceremony. Tartessos was a bridge between East and West bronze, and iron myth and memory. And perhaps buried beneath the marshes of southwestern Spain, its greatest secrets are still waiting to be unearthed. Buried beneath the dry sands of Peru's northern coast, among silent pyramids and shimmering fragments of gold lost to time, lies a civilization so dazzling it feels almost unreal, yet nearly forgotten by history. They crafted funerary masks from solid gold, buried their leaders like gods, and mastered metalworking techniques that still astonish the modern world. For centuries, the Sican, also known as Sipan, built a mysterious, wealthy society saturated with sacred symbolism. And yet they left behind not a single written word. No names, no epic tales, no recorded myths. All that remains are gold bones and questions no one has answered. They were legendary master goldsmiths, but no one knows who they were. What do you think really happened to them? Why would a civilization intelligent enough to turn gold into art leave behind not a single written word? Share your theories or thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. One of the most astonishing aspects of the Sican civilization is their near-total obsession with metal, especially gold. They weren't merely skilled craftsmen. They were master metallurgists working with techniques far ahead of their time. The Sican could cast hollow molds with precision weld at high temperatures and even used early electrochemical gilding methods to create ultra-thin yet durable layers of gold, an achievement rarely seen in any other ancient culture. Alloys like tumbaga, a gold-copper blend, were used with great flexibility to produce artifacts with distinct color durability and symbolic meaning. But more remarkable than their skill is this: to the Sican, gold was not a symbol of wealth, but a symbol of religion and immortality. They didn't use gold for trade or hoarding. Instead, it represented the sun, the gods, and the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Solid gold funerary masks, crowns carved with celestial birds, massive silver earrings, and ceremonial vessels etched with heavenly imagery were all buried with elite leaders inside mud brick pyramids across the Lambayeque region. Each object served not only a ritual purpose, but acted as a visual language, a substitute for writing, telling stories of spirituality, power, and worldview that the Sican never recorded in words. In 1987, the world of archaeology was shaken when Peruvian archaeologist Walter Alva uncovered a fully intact royal tomb, something long believed impossible after thousands of years. It was the tomb of El Señor de Sipan, a powerful ruler of the Sican civilization. Hidden beneath the earth, the burial chamber held over 600 precious artifacts, ranging from gold, silver, and copper to rare seashells and feathers, all arranged in an elaborate funerary ritual unlike anything ever seen before in the Americas. Alongside the ruler's remains were two attendants, a warrior, a woman, possibly a wife or priestess, a child, and a lama, all buried with him to serve in the afterlife. The objects discovered were remarkable not just for their material value, but for their deep symbolic meaning. A solid gold funerary mask, gem-encrusted jewelry, gigantic ceremonial earrings, and a silver-tipped spear all bore the image of the Sican deity, a divine face surrounded by bird wings, rays of light water, and celestial symbols. These symbols revealed a rich, intricate, and ritual-driven religious system. And yet there was not a single word, no writings, no glyphs, no stone carvings to tell us who this man was, how he ruled, or what his people truly believed. One of the greatest and most puzzling paradoxes of the Sican civilization is the absolute silence they left behind. For centuries of flourishing development, the Sican built a highly stratified society, carried out elaborate religious rituals, buried their leaders with hundreds of exquisitely crafted artifacts, and left behind temples and adobe pyramids scattered across Peru's northern coast. And yet they left behind no writing system whatsoever, no alphabet, no stone-carved symbols, no administrative records, and not a single myth preserved in written form. Everything we know about them today comes from archaeological artifacts, repeating symbolic motifs and interpretations by modern researchers. This creates an enormous gap in our understanding of who they truly were. We call them Sican, a modern name given by archaeologists derived from the region where many of their remains were found. But no one knows what they actually called themselves, what language they spoke, what they believed about death, the sun, or the cosmos, or what stories may have been passed down through generations. While civilizations like the Maya Egyptians or Chinese left behind vast bodies of text that allow us to understand their spiritual and social worlds, the Sican are like golden phantoms, glimmering yet completely voiceless. They were a civilization that reached the heights of artistry and spiritual sophistication, yet their true identity is buried completely. No names, no voices, no memories carried forward through time. Without a writing system, the Sican developed an extremely complex visual language of symbols to express their worldview and religious beliefs. Funerary masks were crafted differently, depending on the social status of the deceased, depicting divine power, rebirth, solar energy, or oceanic spirits. On ceremonial plates and artifacts, scholars have found recurring motifs such as celestial birds, deep-sea fish, the sun flowing water, and arms reaching toward the sky, all forming a kind of mythology, told through imagery rather than words. Yet no one truly understands the meaning of these symbols. Did they believe souls were reborn through water, or that the sun was a gateway to the divine? Everything remains speculation, because the Sican left no voice or explanation for future generations to hear. Around the 12th to 13th century, the Sican civilization collapsed abruptly without leaving a farewell. Their adobe pyramids were abandoned royal tombs, left unfinished, and their symbolic religious rituals gradually disappeared. Some researchers believe that severe drought, internal conflict, or deep spiritual upheaval may have caused the society to collapse from within. Later, the Chimu followed by the Inca took over the region, but the spirit of Sican no longer remained. The artisans who once transformed metal into sacred symbols, who buried their rulers like gods, and who built temples with their bare hands in the desert, vanished without leaving a name. There are no written records, no oral legends passed down, and no known descendants today who claim to be Sican. They were simply a civilization that once shone brilliantly, then was buried in sand and eternal silence. And perhaps that's what makes the Sican more fascinating than any other ancient civilization. They're not like Atlantis, a myth, nor like Egypt or China, where we have deep archives of text. The Sican are real. You can touch their artifacts, walk through their temples, even uncover their mummies, and still know nothing about who they truly were. They are anonymous masters, nameless, dead, forgotten deities, and voices that will never be heard again. A civilization without war, without kings, without monuments of power. Yet they built cities with urban planning more advanced than many modern ones. Not Egypt, not Mesopotamia, but a completely different world, one that existed over 4,000 years ago and then vanished as if it had never been there. This was the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappa Civilization, one of the greatest and most perplexing mysteries in human history. Not only was it one of the 3 earliest cradles of civilization, but it also stunned the world with its extraordinary advancements in engineering, city planning, and sanitation, all while leaving behind virtually no signs of war or domination. From around 3300 BCE to 1300 BCE, they built cities like Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, Dholavira, and Lothal, home to hundreds of thousands of people. A world where every street followed a precise grid, every house had its own water supply, and society seemed to function without the need for violence or religious control. And then, the entire civilization disappeared without a trace. No war, No destruction, just a strange and total silence. Why did such an advanced society vanish without a sign? What really happened to them? And could it be a warning for us today? The story of the Indus Valley Civilization begins now. What do you think really happened to the Indus Valley Civilization? Was it flooding drought or a shifting river that caused their fall? Or could there be another reason, one that history books have never mentioned? Share your theory or thoughts in the comments below. Who knows, you might be the one to uncover the next clue in this mystery that has lasted for thousands of years. One of the most remarkable aspects that made the Indus Valley Civilization stand out was its urban planning that was thousands of years ahead of its time. Indus cities weren't random clusters of houses, they were the result of a sophisticated master plan, streets laid out in a precise grid, intersecting at right angles, divided clearly into functional zones from residential and industrial areas to administrative or public centers. What's truly astonishing is that their sewage and public sanitation systems were more advanced than those in many medieval European cities. Drainage pipes were constructed beneath the main streets, carrying wastewater from households out of the city, a closed-loop system that was efficient and remarkably progressive. Even more impressive, most houses had private bathrooms and wells, and in many areas there were water filtration systems, evidence of a society deeply concerned with personal hygiene and quality of life. Bricks used in construction were manufactured with a standardized 1:4 ratio, a level of precision that's hard to believe for an ancient society. This suggests they had a unified system of measurement, advanced technical skills, and the capacity for mass production. Unlike most other ancient civilizations, where signs of warfare, conquest, and violence are seen as inevitable, the Indus civilization appears to have been strikingly peaceful. To this day, archaeologists have found no evidence of large-scale warfare, military fortifications, or weapons in their ruins. There are no power monuments, no massive temples to war gods, no grand royal tombs. Everything points to a relatively equal, stable, and harmonious society. Their architectural remains focus on everyday life, not on displays of power or coercive religious control. Even their seals, small carved tablets featuring animal symbols used in trade, carry no indications of violence. Instead, they emphasize symbolism and commerce. This has led many scholars to wonder, was this one of the rare civilizations to achieve prosperity without war? Although the Indus script remains undeciphered, the artifacts left behind, from finely crafted pottery and jewelry to precision measuring tools, indicate a rich cultural and economic life. Archaeological evidence shows that the Indus civilization had a widespread trade network exchanging goods with Mesopotamia, Central Asia, and coastal regions of the Arabian Peninsula. They had seaports, merchant ships, and a variety of products, from metals and semi-precious stones to grains and textiles. Some cities like Lothal even had ancient dockyards and canal systems, proof that they were not solely reliant on agriculture, but also had a strong maritime economic mindset. Perhaps what makes the Indus Valley civilization so haunting and difficult to understand is not what they built, but how they vanished suddenly, silently, with no trace of violence or bloody collapse. Between 1900 BCE and 1300 BCE, once prosperous cities like Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and Dholavira began to decline rapidly. Populations dropped, trade activities stalled, construction projects shrank, and eventually, the entire civilization seemed to fade from the map of history. There is no evidence of invasion from outside, no signs of war, massacres, or widespread destruction like those commonly seen in the fall of other ancient civilizations. The cities of the Indus were not burned nor do we see ruins that indicate last-ditch defenses or desperate battles. They were simply abandoned, as if their inhabitants gradually walked away in silence. Researchers have proposed several theories to explain this strange collapse: climate change and vanishing rivers. One of the most cited reasons is prolonged climate change, leading to a sharp decline in water availability, especially the case of the Ghaggar-Hakra River, believed by some to be the sacred Saraswati of ancient texts, which either dried up or changed course due to tectonic activity. For a society heavily reliant on irrigation and agriculture, the loss of water meant their cities could no longer sustain life. Repeated flooding and environmental instability. Mohenjo-Daro, one of the largest Indus cities, shows strong archaeological evidence of multiple episodes of flooding with layers of silt piled upon one another. These recurring floods not only damaged infrastructure, but likely caused fatigue among the population, eroding their will and ability to rebuild. Internal decline and lack of centralized governance. The absence of kings, or a clear ruling class which may have been a strength in times of peace, could have become a critical weakness in the face of widespread crisis. Without centralized coordination, the society may have struggled to respond effectively to environmental, economic, or migratory pressures. Gradual migration eastward, paving the way for the Vedic civilization. Some scholars believe that instead of a violent collapse, the people of Indus withdrew in an orderly manner. They gradually abandoned their cities along the Indus River and migrated eastward toward the Ganges Plains, where the environment was more stable. These migrating communities may have eventually laid the foundations for the post-Indus Vedic civilization. Because there is no evidence of war or visible catastrophe, the end of the Indus Valley civilization has often been described as a silent death of a great civilization, one that had achieved astonishing levels of technological and social advancement, but ultimately could not overcome the forces of nature and the inherent fragility of its social structure. Today, what remains of the Indus civilization, burnt bricks, trade seals, drainage systems, and artisanal tools, continues to be uncovered and studied. And even though we still don't fully understand them, the modern world remains in awe of their precision, logic, and ability to organize a peaceful, thriving society. The Indus reminds us that civilization does not require conquest, that progress can be built on order, cooperation, and harmony with nature, and that even the most advanced societies can collapse if they fail to adapt to environmental change. Long before the Egyptian pyramids, long before the first Chinese dynasty, there was a great civilization, a place where humans first dared to record their thoughts in writing, a place where the first true cities rose from dust, a place where law, astronomy, mathematics, and mythology were born, shaped by the hands of people who lived more than 5,000 years ago. It wasn't a legend, it was real. Its name was Sumer. Located in Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Sumer was the first civilization in human history to leave behind written records. They built complex cities, raised towering ziggurats that reached toward the heavens, and invented writing to preserve their entire world. And then, as if someone erased them from history, they vanished, suddenly, without a farewell. No great final battle, no last recorded collapse, only silent clay tablets buried for millennia beneath the earth. How could such a pioneering civilization, the foundation of all societies that followed, simply disappear without anyone noticing? This isn't just an archaeological question. It's one of the greatest mysteries in human history. What about you? What do you think really happened to the Sumerians? Were they wiped out by war? Or was it drought, disease, or some unrecorded catastrophe? Or maybe they never truly disappeared at all. Drop your theory in the comments below. Every perspective matters. Who knows, maybe you hold the missing piece to a 5,000-year-old mystery. Over 5,000 years ago, around 3200 BCE, while most of humanity still lived as nomads or practiced rudimentary farming, the Sumerians made one of the greatest breakthroughs in human history writing. They invented the cuneiform system, a series of wedge-shaped symbols pressed into clay tablets using styluses. Initially, it served as a simple tool to record trade transactions and offerings to temples. However, from this practical beginning, Sumerian writing quickly evolved into a fully developed written language capable of recording laws, astronomy, mythology, and literature. One of the most important surviving works is the Epic of Gilgamesh, a powerful story about a king's quest for immortality, reflecting the deep philosophical and spiritual thinking of the Sumerians. The invention of writing wasn't just a technological innovation, it was the dividing line between prehistory and history, marking the dawn of an era in which humans could preserve knowledge, pass down ideas, and build civilization through written records. Unlike the centralized empires that emerged later, Sumer existed as a network of independent city-states such as Uruk-Lagash and Nippur. Each city-state was a miniature world of its own, with its own king, patron, deity, army, and legal system. There was no single central authority. Rather, these cities coexisted in a loosely connected web of rivalry and cooperation. This represented an early, yet remarkably advanced form of political organization, allowing for experimentation with different models of governance. Sumerian society was clearly stratified, ranging from nobles and priests to commoners and slaves. Most notably, the Ur-Nammu law code, written around 2100 BCE, is the oldest known legal text ever discovered, demonstrating a clear awareness of order, justice, and state authority at the very dawn of civilization. The Sumerians were not only the first to invent writing, they were also among the earliest mathematicians and astronomers. They developed a base 60 number system, which became the foundation for how we divide time, 60 seconds, 60 minutes, and geometry, 360 degrees in a circle today. They could measure land area, calculate volume, and construct calendars based on lunar cycles, creating a 12-month lunar year. By observing the skies, they were able to predict solar eclipses, track seasonal changes, and model celestial movements. These achievements were not only crucial for agriculture, but also laid the groundwork for Babylonian science, ancient Greek astronomy, and even aspects of modern scientific understanding. Among the great structures left behind by the Sumerians, the ziggurat stands out as the clearest symbol of both religious devotion and political authority. These were multi-tiered temple towers made of baked bricks, rising dozens of meters high at the heart of each city. Every ziggurat was dedicated to a specific patron deity whom the Sumerians believed dwelled at the top of the tower. The ziggurat of Ur is a prime example, not only a religious center, but also a ceremonial and administrative hub for the entire city-state. The construction of such massive monuments reflects their remarkable organizational abilities, architectural skill, and above all, the desire to bridge heaven and earth, a place where humans sought to reach the divine with their own hands. What makes the Sumerian civilization one of the most haunting and mysterious in human history is not just what they built, but how they disappeared. Around 2000 BCE, while their cities were still active, clay tablets were still being inscribed, and ziggurats still towered over the Mesopotamian plains, everything suddenly stopped. No more buildings were constructed. No records described a collapse. No signs warned of impending doom. It's as if one day an entire civilization quietly chose to withdraw from history. Archaeologists and historians have proposed various theories to explain this strange vanishing. One common idea is foreign invasion. Amorite tribes from the west and the Elamites from the east swept in, overtaking Sumerian city-states, replacing their rulers and imposing new systems. But if invasion alone were the cause, why didn't the Sumerians leave behind laments, desperate poetry, or inscriptions marking their downfall? Many civilizations have survived conquest while maintaining their cultural voice. Another theory involves climate change. Geological evidence suggests a long period of drought may have destroyed irrigation systems, salinized farmland due to falling groundwater levels, and forced people to abandon once thriving lands. But if the climate was truly the main cause, how could a civilization so experienced in flood control be helpless against drought? Might there have been something even more catastrophic that remains undiscovered? Some scholars suggest internal conflict, escalating rivalries among city-states, rising social inequality, and a collapse of faith in leadership may have led Sumerian society to crumble from within. Yet archaeological excavations have revealed no clear evidence of widespread war or civil upheaval. The final and most widely supported theory today is that the Sumerians didn't truly vanish, but were absorbed into successor cultures, especially Akkadian and Babylonian. Their gods, writing systems, mythology, and legal thinking continued to live on, but the name Sumer gradually faded and was forgotten. Whatever the reason, the fact remains: there is no final inscription, no royal declaration of defeat, no last words from a dying dynasty. A civilization that pioneered written history, left behind no written record of its own end. And perhaps that is what makes Sumer one of the quietest, most unsettling, and most enduring mysteries in all of human history. Today, most of what we know about the Sumerians comes from over 500,000 clay tablets unearthed in Mesopotamia, many of which still remain undeciphered. For centuries, Sumer was thought to be a legend, until the discovery of cuneiform in the 19th century brought an entire lost civilization back to life. And yet the strange paradox is this: the very people who invented writing, the first to record human history, left no explanation for their own disappearance. No records of famine, no descriptions of a final war, no last words from a dying king. It's as if one day they simply stopped writing, stopped building, and vanished. The Sumerians were the ones who began human history, who taught us to record, build, organize, worship, and measure the world. Yet instead of ending with a dramatic collapse, they quietly withdrew from the stage of history. And perhaps it is this very silence that makes them more legendary than ever. When people speak of ancient civilizations, our minds instinctively jump to Egypt's towering pyramids, Mesopotamia's ziggurats, or the lost cities of the Indus Valley. But what if I told you that one of the most ancient and enduring civilizations on Earth didn't rise in the Middle East or Europe, but in Japan? Hidden beneath the quiet forests and misty coastlines of prehistoric Japan was a culture so old, so persistent, and so deeply artistic it would outlast empires, rewrite timelines, and challenge everything we thought we knew about early humanity. It's called the Jomon civilization, and it quietly flourished for over 10,000 years. Not with armies or monuments, but with fire earth and cord-marked pottery that still speaks today of a people who mastered the art of living in harmony with the land long before the first plow ever touched the soil. What do you think? Does it surprise you that Japan once hosted a civilization that thrived for over 10,000 years without agriculture kings or war? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Would you consider Jomon one of the great civilizations of the ancient world, even if they never built pyramids? Let that sink in. more than 10 millennia. From as early as 14,000 BCE until around 300 BCE, the people of Jomon, Japan, lived, crafted, hunted, worshipped, and built a way of life that would quietly outlast the Egyptian pyramids, the Mayan temples, and even the emergence of agriculture in much of the rest of the world. Most civilizations rise and fall in a few centuries, but Jomon culture endured across 100 centuries, changing gradually yet remarkably stable in its continuity. This long stretch of time was not marked by grand empires or monumental architecture. Instead, the Jomon people left behind something arguably more precious, evidence of a deep connection between humans and the natural world, preserved in thousands of intricately designed clay pots, figurines, and settlement remains. What makes the Jomon so extraordinary is not just their age, but the fact that they achieved such rich cultural expression without agriculture, metal tools, or centralized states. Unlike many other prehistoric societies, the Jomon weren't nomadic wanderers. Despite relying primarily on hunting, gathering, and fishing, they built permanent settlements, some with over 500 pit dwellings. They took advantage of Japan's rich ecosystems, coastal waters teeming with fish forests full of game, and rivers abundant with freshwater shellfish. This abundance allowed them to establish sedentary lifestyles without domesticating crops or animals, making them one of the earliest examples of a non-agricultural yet settled society. Over the millennia, their pottery evolved from simple utilitarian vessels to stunning works of art with dramatic flared rims, elaborate patterns, and mystical symbols. Some of these pots date back to 14,000 BCE, making them the oldest known pottery in the world. But it wasn't just functional wear. These objects reveal a society that deeply valued aesthetic expression and symbolic meaning. Among their most enigmatic creations are the doge figurines, clay idols with exaggerated features, oversized eyes, and surreal postures. These are often interpreted as fertility symbols, spiritual icons, or ritual objects. Their very existence hints at a culture rich in symbolism, ritual, and spiritual imagination, far more advanced in mindset than most would expect from a society without writing or cities. Through these artifacts, we glimpse a world that was spiritually rich and culturally complex despite lacking the trappings of advanced civilization. Archaeological sites such as Sannai Maruyama in Aomori Prefecture provide tangible evidence of this complexity. Large-scale dwellings, ritual spaces, storage pits, even hints of long-distance trade in jade and obsidian. This was no primitive tribe. It was a long-lived culture with deep-rooted social practices. But it is the incredible time span of Jomon life that truly challenges our understanding of civilization. In a world where most societies rise quickly and collapse in chaos, how did a non-agricultural culture last over 10,000 years? The answer may lie in their sustainable relationship with nature. The Jomon didn't try to dominate their environment. Instead, they adapted to its rhythms. They hunted without over-exploiting, foraged with balance, and built communities in harmony with the land. In doing so, they created a model of human longevity that modern civilizations rarely achieve. Unlike many ancient civilizations that collapse suddenly due to war, climate change, or internal crises, the Jomon civilization came to an end gradually and peacefully. Their way of life evolved through various phases from early to final Jomon, but there were no signs of abrupt collapse or complete disappearance. Instead, it slowly merged with a new cultural wave as the Yayoi people arrived from the Asian mainland around 300 BCE, bringing rice farming and metalworking techniques. However, the Jomon were not entirely replaced. Elements of their culture, customs, and even their bloodline continued to live on, in modern Japanese people. Recent genetic studies show that people in northern Japan, such as in Hokkaido, still carry clear traces of Jomon ancestry, proving that this cultural transition was not an ending, but rather a quiet yet enduring continuity. Today, sites of Jomon culture have been recognized as UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and their artifacts are treasured not only for their age, but for what they represent: a civilization that lived long, changed slowly, and left no empires behind, but gave the world something arguably more enduring: resilience and beauty in simplicity. So did Japan really have a 10,000-year-old pottery culture? Yes, without a doubt. And it may be one of the most astonishing and underappreciated stories in human history. In a time when we measure success by speed, expansion, and domination, the Jomon remind us of another path: slow, steady, sustainable, and deeply human. Before the age of philosophers, before democracy was ever dreamed of, in Athens there stood a civilization of warrior kings and towering stone fortresses, a people who carved their legends into gold and fire. This was the world of the Mycenaeans. From around 1600 to 1100 BCE, they ruled the Greek mainland with a blend of brute power and sophisticated bureaucracy. Their names would echo through eternity in epic poems, their cities crowned with cyclopean walls, and their scribes the first to record the Greek language in the cryptic symbols of Linear B. They were not just ancestors of the Greeks. They were the first to dream of Troy, the first to forge a heroic code, and the first to vanish almost without a trace. What do you think happened to the Mycenaeans? How could such a powerful civilization, with writing warlords and fortified cities, vanish so completely? Drop your theories in the comments. Was it war, natural disaster, rebellion, or something even more mysterious? Despite their brilliance, the Mycenaeans disappeared from history in a way that still baffles scholars. These were not a primitive people. They possessed advanced metallurgy, crafted fine ceramics, managed vast palace economies, and maintained complex bureaucracies using the earliest form of written Greek Linear B. Their cities were centers of political power, religious ritual, and military strength, thriving on trade routes that linked them to the wider Mediterranean. Rooted in Minoan traditions, but reshaped by their own warrior ethos, the Mycenaeans forged a unique civilization. Yet all of this came crashing down. What caused such an advanced society to unravel so completely? How could the builders of such splendor vanish, leaving only shattered ruins and unanswered questions? The mystery only deepens the fascination. Mycenaean cities, such as Mycenae, Tiryns, and Pylos, were not merely residences for the elite. They were among the most fortified political, religious, and military centers of the Bronze Age. These citadels were enclosed by massive cyclopean walls built from multi-ton stones, fitted together without mortar so large that later Greeks believed they must have been constructed by giants. Inside, the palaces served as both administrative hubs and symbols of royal power. The Mycenaeans buried their ruling class in lavish shaft graves, accompanied by golden masks, weapons, and intricate jewelry, reflecting a wealthy, highly stratified society that honored its ancestors through monumental architecture. The Mycenaeans did not exist in isolation. They were part of a vast network that connected the major civilizations of the Bronze Age. From the Aegean, they extended their influence to Egypt, the Hittite Empire, and coastal regions of the Mediterranean, such as the Levant. Archaeological evidence shows they engaged in trade routes, exchanging precious metals, luxury goods like ivory and pottery, and even cultural ideas. This interconnectedness brought them prosperity, but also made them vulnerable when the wider network began to collapse. Perhaps most famously, The Mycenaeans provided the cultural and historical bedrock for Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. The characters Agamemnon, Menelaus, Achilles, Odysseus, Echo, real Mycenaean rulers and warriors. The world they inhabited, full of alliances, vendettas, and distant warfare, matches the social fabric described in Homeric poetry. Around 1200 to 1100 BCE, a catastrophic event unfolded. The palatial centers of the Mycenaean civilization collapsed one after another in violence. Major cities like Pylos, Tiryns, Thebes, and even Mycenae, the symbol of ultimate power, show clear archaeological evidence of fire destruction and abandonment. The linear B writing system vanished completely, bringing down with it the entire administrative machinery that had once supported the economy and politics. Within just a few generations, Greece fell into what is now known as the Greek Dark Age, an era without writing, without monumental architecture, and with nearly all trade coming to a halt. What is most alarming is not just the collapse itself, but the speed of it. A once powerful and sophisticated civilization disappeared almost without explanation, leaving behind only the silence of ruins and questions still unanswered. The collapse of the Mycenaean civilization remains one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world, a historical event that even after more than 3 millennia continues to puzzle archaeologists and historians. Many theories have been proposed to explain how such a powerful, organized, and far-reaching civilization could disappear so rapidly. One of the most widely discussed is the invasion by the Sea People's mysterious maritime raiders who devastated several Eastern Mediterranean civilizations around the same time, including the Hittite Empire and New Kingdom Egypt. If Mycenaean Greece was among their targets, the swift destruction of coastal cities could have triggered a broader collapse. Another approach focuses on internal unrest. Some scholars argue that growing social inequality, where the ruling elite accumulated too much wealth and power, led to widespread dissatisfaction, revolts, or even internal coups between noble families. In a society that relied heavily on palace-centered authority, any disruption to the central system could have caused the entire structure to unravel. Natural disasters and climate change must also be considered. Greece lies along major fault lines, and archaeological sites show evidence of significant earthquakes during this period. Simultaneously, geological studies and pollen analysis suggest a prolonged drought around 1200 BCE, which may have led to crop failure, widespread famine, and social instability. Finally, some researchers see the Mycenaean collapse as part of a broader Late Bronze Age systemic crisis, where interdependent civilizations across the region were linked by trade politics and technology. The breakdown of even a single link, such as the disruption of tin supplies essential for making bronze, could have triggered a domino effect. In this view, Mycenaean Greece was not the sole victim, but one piece of a larger interconnected world that was unraveling. Modern scientific discoveries are gradually shedding more light on the collapse of the Mycenaean civilization. Analysis of ancient pollen reveals a significant decline in agricultural activity around 1200 BCE, clear evidence of a prolonged drought. At the same time, isotope studies of human remains indicate changes in diet and mobility, suggesting the occurrence of famine migration or social instability. No single factor alone could have destroyed an entire civilization, but when environmental, social, and economic shocks strike simultaneously, they can form a perfect storm, powerful enough to wipe out a once glorious world. Despite the destruction, some small communities survived. Oral traditions preserved memories of the Mycenaeans. Over time, these evolved into the stories Homer would later record. But for centuries, Greece regressed. The loss of writing, large-scale architecture, An interregional exchange marked a profound cultural silence that lasted until the 8th century BCE, when the Greek alphabet appeared and the polis began to emerge. The collapse of Mycenaean civilization wasn't just the end of a political order, it was the unraveling of an entire system of knowledge, power, and memory. Yet paradoxically, it planted the seeds of later rebirth. The heroes of Homer became models for Greek values of honor, tragedy, and resilience. Even today, the fall of Mycenae stands as a powerful reminder: civilizations, no matter how advanced, remain vulnerable to a convergence of crisis, natural, social, and political. Imagine living in a peaceful village, and then one day, the entire community, not because of war, not because of a natural disaster, gathers to set fire to their own homes. Not just once, but every few generations, like a sacred ritual. Sounds like a brutal rite or a scene from science fiction, but this was the strange reality of a very real civilization. The Cucuteni Tripilia, which thrived over 7,000 years ago in what is now Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine. They didn't build pyramids, leave behind ancient texts, or erect mysterious monuments. What they left behind were ashes, charred red bricks, and layers of clay baked by roaring flames, undeniable evidence that they deliberately burned down their entire settlements again and again. Not due to disaster, not due to invasion, but by their own hands, systematically, cyclically, and ritually. And that has become one of the greatest archaeological mysteries in Europe. Why do you think they did this? If it wasn't war and it wasn't disaster, what could have driven an entire community to burn down their own homes in a repeating cycle? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Was it a ritual of rebirth, an ancient form of religion, or something that goes far beyond our modern imagination? When discussing the Neolithic and early Chalcolithic periods in Europe, few would expect that a civilization with such astonishing urban scale had once existed. The Cucuteni Tripilia culture. Far from being a scattered collection of small villages, the Tripilia people built massive settlements arranged in concentric circular patterns unlike anything else in prehistoric Europe. Some of these sites stretched over 400 hectares, containing up to 3,000 individual homes, the equivalent of a prehistoric city, capable of housing 10,000 to 15,000 people. These numbers are staggering even when compared to contemporaneous civilizations such as early Egypt or Sumer. The spatial organization of these settlements was remarkably deliberate. Houses were arranged in circular rings, forming defined radial pathways leading inward to a central open space, likely used for ritual gatherings or communal assemblies. Although they had no written language, their spatial planning reveals a surprisingly advanced urban mindset, deeply rooted in community structure and ceremonial life. For this reason, modern archaeologists consider these sites not just villages, but possibly the first proto-cities in Europe, emerging thousands of years before classical cities appeared in Greece or Rome. One of the strangest mysteries uncovered by archaeologists at Cucuteni Tripilia sites is the widespread evidence of burned settlements. Not just a few scattered houses, but entire villages with hundreds of homes were set ablaze at once, leaving behind thick layers of ash, scorched red clay, and carbonized wood spread across excavation sites. What's truly remarkable is that there's no evidence of warfare. No weapons, no fortifications, no mass graves, no signs of violent conflict. What makes this even more puzzling is that it appears to have happened cyclically, approximately every 60 to 80 years. Every few generations, the inhabitants would deliberately burn down their entire village and then rebuild directly atop the ashes. This wasn't the result of disaster, nor was it done in haste. All signs point to a purposeful, carefully organized process repeated over centuries. What could compel an entire civilization to repeatedly destroy the very place they lived, almost as if it were a ritual? That question still has no definitive answer. Among the many theories proposed to explain the strange behavior of the Cucuteni Tripilia people, the most widely accepted suggests that burning their homes was part of a cyclical religious ritual. In early agrarian societies, fire was not just a tool, it was a sacred symbol of purification, renewal, and the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The Tripilia people may have believed that after a certain period of time, their living space had to be cleansed by fire, and from the ashes, a new purer life could begin. It resembled a cosmic renewal ritual where the old must be destroyed to make way for the new. Other scholars have proposed alternative interpretations. The act of burning homes may have been tied to the passing of elders' leadership transitions or key spiritual milestones in the community. Each generation might have burned the traces of the past as a gesture of reverence to their ancestors, seeing old houses not as dwellings anymore, but as sacred spaces to be transformed through the ritual of fire. Whether as a cyclical rite, a social symbol, or an ancestral belief, all signs point to this. The Tripilia people did not burn their homes to destroy, but to recreate life itself. What's remarkable is that the act of burning homes wasn't only symbolic or ritualistic, it also accidentally became an exceptional tool for archaeological preservation. When the Cucuteni Tripilia people set fire to their dwellings, the clay walls were exposed to intense heat and hardened, turning into a primitive form of fired brick. As a result, many of the items inside, such as pottery, fertility figurines, jewelry, and tools, were preserved almost intact for over 7,000 years rather than decomposing over time. Today, archaeologists refer to this as the unintended preservation effect, because these repeated burnings have vividly reconstructed the material, culture, rituals, and beliefs of a civilization with no written records. In the ashes and scorched bricks, a lost past has re-emerged more clearly than anyone could have imagined. Unlike many other civilizations of the time, Cucuteni Tripilia built no fortifications, had no weapons of war, and left behind no evidence of large-scale violence. What was found was simple stone knives, farming tools, and pottery, no signs of armies or oppressive ruling classes. This has led many anthropologists to believe that this might have been a peaceful society, one with decentralized power, where women held significant roles as suggested by the prominence of fertility figurines, and communal life was based more on cooperation than conflict. Although the Cucuteni Tripilia civilization flourished for nearly 2,000 years around 2700 BCE, it vanished completely from history in a manner both quiet and puzzling. There are no signs of epidemic, no evidence of warfare, and no records of invasion. It was as if they had simply disappeared into thin air, leaving behind only ashes, scorched bricks, and unfinished artifacts. Many theories have been proposed. Some researchers believe that climate change may have played a role. Prolonged drought and resource depletion may have rendered their large settlement model unsustainable. Others point to pressure from Indo-European nomadic tribes who brought a warrior-based lifestyle and radically different social organization, potentially leading to conflict or displacement. There are also theories suggesting that their ritual-based, non-hierarchical society may have become too rigid, unable to adapt to rapid changes in environment and population dynamics. Whatever the reason, their disappearance remains one of the greatest prehistoric archaeological mysteries in Europe. Cucuteni Tripilia left behind no stone inscriptions or ancient texts, but instead layers of ash, fire-hardened clay, and thousands of small but meaningful artifacts. They lived in large, organized communities, worshipped fertility deities, crafted elegant ceramics, and most mysteriously of all, believed that to continue living, one sometimes had to burn everything down. To them, perhaps fire was not just destruction, but a sacred symbol of transformation, rebirth, and a new beginning.